Impossible. That was the only word that clawed its way through Ethan Knight's suddenly paralyzed mind. The woman who emerged from the apartment was a stranger, a breathtaking vision in shimmering cobalt silk, her eyes sparkling with a knowing amusement that sent a jolt straight through his meticulously ordered world. This couldn't be Sophia Rossi, the quiet, sensible yoga instructor he'd hired for a simple, understated charade at his sister's wedding. But as she met his stunned, disbelieving gaze, her lips curved into a subtle, devastatingly beautiful smile. Surprised, Mr. Knight, she murmured, her voice a silken challenge. Or did you truly expect your $5,000 companion to arrive in yoga pants for an event like this? What secrets does this stunning woman truly hold? And how will her shocking transformation completely derail the powerful boss's carefully laid plans for a quiet evening? Subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think Ethan Knight is about to discover? The insistent chime of his private line sliced through the late afternoon stillness of Ethan Knight's office. He knew with a certainty that settled like lead in his stomach who it was. Only two people used that line with such relentless optimism, his mother or his sister, Jessica. Both currently were on a singular unified mission to see him suitably paired before Jessica's wedding. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment, the skyline of the city, a glittering, indifferent panorama beyond his vast window. Another perfect suggestion, no doubt. Another woman pre-approved by the Knight family matriarchy, guaranteed to be just lovely. He let it ring a third time before snatching up the receiver. Knight. Ethan, darling. You sound busy. Jessica's voice, bright and relentlessly cheerful, chirped down the line. Just a quick call, I promise. Mum and I were just having tea, and we were thinking. Ethan leaned back in his leather chair, the expensive material sighing softly beneath him. He could already picture it. Jessica, all effusive energy, and his mother, her elegant brow furrowed with concern, discussing his solitary state as if it were a national crisis. You were thinking, he interjected, his tone drier than he intended, that I absolutely must have a date for your wedding. A +1. A human shield against the well-meaning inquiries of Aunt Carol and the formidable Mrs. Henderson. A slight pause. Well, yes. Jessica admitted, a hint of a pout in her voice. Is that so terrible it's my big day, Ethan? I just want you to be happy. And honestly, showing up alone again. It just looks a bit sad, doesn't it? Like you've given up. Given up. The words echoed in the sterile perfection of his office. Had he given up, or had he simply made a pragmatic choice years ago, after? He'd poured himself into Knight Industries, building an empire from his father's legacy, finding a cold comfort in balance sheets and boardrooms, where emotions were liabilities, not assets. Love, in his experience, was a volatile market prone to devastating crashes. He preferred solid ground. I haven't given up, Jess, he said, a little too sharply. I've merely prioritized. And right now my priority is ensuring your wedding fund doesn't require a bailout from the National Treasury. That usually diverted her. Oh, Ethan, don't be such a grouch. She laughed, easily deflected. Just think about it. For me, there's this lovely woman, a friend of David's cousin, an art curator. I'll consider all options. He said a phrase that in his lexicon meant, absolutely not. He ended the call with a vague promise, the familiar ache of familial obligation settling in. The pressure was mounting. The wedding was only a few weeks away. He needed a solution. A temporary one, a professional one even. The thought, absurd as it was, took root. A few discreet inquiries later, a name landed on his desk, highly recommended by an associate who specialized in unconventional problem-solving. Sophia Rossi, a yoga instructor. The irony wasn't lost on him. He, Ethan Knight, purveyor of stress in multi-billion-dollar increments, seeking tranquility, or at least the appearance of it from a yoga teacher. The brief file noted her calm demeanor, intelligence, and crucially her discretion. It also hinted at a need for funds, for some sort of advanced training, a leverage point. He arranged a meeting at a quiet, neutral cafe far from his usual high-powered lunch spots. He arrived first, choosing a table in the corner, his Savile Row suit feeling conspicuously out of place amidst the scent of sandalwood and herbal tea. Sophia Rossi entered a few minutes later, and he found himself mildly surprised. He'd expected someone ethereal, perhaps a little flaky. Instead, the woman who approached had a quiet poise, her movements graceful but grounded. She wasn't conventionally glamorous in the way the women in his circle were, but there was an intelligence in her dark eyes, a strength in the set of her jaw that was intriguing. She wore simple, elegant clothes that spoke of quality without screaming for attention. "Mr. Knight," she asked, her voice calm, with a warmth that was unexpected. "Ms. Rossi." "Please," he gestured to the chair. Small talk was anathema to him. He got straight to the point, laying out the situation with the detached precision of a boardroom presentation. His sister's wedding, the family pressure, the need for a companion, a temporary arrangement. Strictly business. Sophia listened intently, her gaze unwavering, a slight, unreadable smile playing on her lips. When he finished naming a sum, $5,000 for an evening's performance, plus a generous allowance for an appropriate dress, she didn't immediately respond. The silence stretched just long enough for Ethan to feel a flicker of unease. Perhaps this was a mistake. Then she tilted her head. "Mr. Knight," she began, her voice still calm, but with an undercurrent of something he couldn't quite decipher. Amusement. "Let me see if I understand this correctly. You wish to hire me, to be your girlfriend for an evening, my companion," he corrected a touch stiffly, "to portray the role of someone I am involved with." "Plausibly." Plausibly," she repeated, the corner of her mouth twitching. "And this plausible involvement includes navigating your family, smiling at appropriate junctures, and presumably discussing our many fictional shared interests." Ethan felt a muscle tighten in his jaw. "Essentially, yes. It's a performance. The fee, I believe, is more than adequate for the scope of work." He almost cringed inwardly at his own corporate jargon. Sophia's dark eyes sparkled. "The scope of work," she echoed softly, and this time he was certain it was amusement. "It's certainly unconventional. Most of my clients are seeking inner peace, not a fabricated +1. She paused, then looked at him directly. "I do have a rather intensive yoga master's program in Bali I've been saving for. Your offer, it would certainly expedite that goal." Relief, quickly suppressed, washed over Ethan. "So you're amenable." "Potentially," she said, drawing the word out. "However, I would have a few conditions, non-negotiable, I'm afraid." Ethan raised an eyebrow. He wasn't used to conditions from people he was essentially hiring. "Go on." "Firstly," Sophia said, her gaze direct and clear, "this is, as you so aptly put it, a performance. There will be no actions implied or explicit that extend beyond that role. My personal space and boundaries are to be respected at all times. Understood?" "And expected," Ethan agreed, a little surprised by her forthrightness. "Secondly, while I appreciate the wardrobe allowance, I prefer to choose my own attire. I have something suitable." He frowned slightly. He'd envisioned guiding her towards something appropriately understated, something that wouldn't cause a stir. Perfectly suitable for a high-profile wedding, Mr. Knight, she assured him, a hint of challenge in her tone. And it will be my choice. He considered her. This wasn't the pliant, easily managed arrangement he'd anticipated. There was a core of steel beneath that serene exterior. It was unexpectedly interesting. Very well. Your choice of attire. And thirdly, she continued, while I will endeavor to be a charming and plausibly involved companion, I will not engage in any deceit that I deem malicious or harmful. I will be polite. I will make small talk. I will even laugh at your jokes, should you make any. A faint smile. But I will not lie about substantive matters if pressed in a way that compromises my integrity. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Integrity. It was a word rarely heard, and even more rarely demonstrated in his world. That seems fair, he conceded. This was more complicated than he'd thought. And yet, so Mr. Knight, Sophia said, leaning forward slightly. Do we have an agreement based on these challenging clauses? The humor was back in her eyes, gentle but definite. He found himself almost smiling. Almost. We have an agreement, Miss Rossi. She extended a hand. Her grip, when he took it, was firm, her skin surprisingly warm. Then I suppose I should start rehearsing my adoring gazes. You can call me Sophia. Ethan, he replied, the name feeling strangely personal on his lips in this context. As he watched Sophia Rossi walk away, a woman who had just agreed to be his hired companion, yet had somehow negotiated the terms like a seasoned diplomat, Ethan Knight felt a peculiar mix of relief and an entirely unfamiliar sensation. It might have been intrigue, or perhaps it was simply the dawning realization that this charade for his sister's wedding might be anything but boring. He had hired a yoga instructor to bring peace to his family table, but he had a distinct feeling Sophia Rossi might just bring a little unexpected storm into his very orderly life. And for the first time in a long time, the thought didn't entirely displease him. The week leading up to Jessica's wedding was for Ethan Knight an exercise in compartmentalization. By day, he commanded boardrooms, navigated complex negotiations, and managed the sprawling interests of Knight Industries with his usual incisive authority. By evening, however, he found himself engaged in a series of preparatory consultations, as he'd termed them in his own mind, with Sophia Rossi. Their first rehearsal, as Sophia had cheekily called it, took place in the impersonal lounge of a downtown hotel. Her choice, not his. She'd arrived with a small notebook and a pen, looking every inch the diligent student, which Ethan found both mildly irritating and strangely disarming. Right he'd begun all business. Our story. We need a plausible narrative. How we met. How long we've been seeing each other. Sophia had nodded, pen poised. Of course, authenticity is key in any convincing performance. So, Mr. Knight, Ethan, where did our whirlwind romance begin? A chance encounter at a charity gala, a heated debate over stock options that blossomed into passion. Her eyes held that familiar glint of amusement. Ethan had scowled faintly. Nothing so dramatic? Let's say we met through a mutual acquaintance. Low-key. A quiet dinner. We've been dating for perhaps 6 months. Exclusive, but not yet at the stage of discussing linen patterns. 6 months, Sophia mused, tapping her pen against her lips. A respectable time frame. Long enough for your family to expect my presence, short enough for me not to know the intricate details of Great-Aunt Mildred's prize-winning rose bushes. Perfect. She jotted something down. And our shared interests beyond a mutual appreciation for discretion. He'd found himself at a loss. Shared interests with a yoga instructor. We both appreciate art, he'd offered, grasping at the thinnest of straws. and quiet evenings. Ah, the contemplative type. Sophia had said, her smile widening slightly. So no tales of us scaling Mount Kilimanjaro on a whim. Then no, Ethan had stated perhaps a little too firmly. Definitely not. He'd then attempted to coach her on a few key family members, who to flatter, who to avoid. It felt absurd, like preparing an operative for a deep cover assignment rather than a date for a wedding. At one point, he'd suggested they practice a casual touch, an arm around her shoulder perhaps, the resulting stiffness from his end and Sophia's barely suppressed laugh as she'd commented, "Relax, Ethan." It's a gesture of affection, not a hostile takeover bid, had quickly put an end to that particular exercise. He'd decided they'd rely on polite smiles and proximity. Despite the awkwardness, or perhaps because of it, Ethan found himself observing Sophia more closely than he'd intended. She was intelligent, quick-witted, and possessed a quiet dignity that was increasingly hard to ignore. He noted the way she listened, truly listened, not just waiting for her turn to speak. Still, he clung to his initial assessment. She was at her core, simple, grounded, uncomplicated, exactly what he needed to navigate Jessica's wedding without additional drama. When she'd firmly, though politely, reiterated her intention to choose her own dress, he'd acquiesced with an internal shrug. How elaborate could a yoga instructor's idea of suitable be? He envisioned something linen-flowing, perhaps a tasteful beige, entirely unremarkable, perfect. Jessica, of course, had called for updates. "So your mysterious new lady, is she wonderful? Does Mom approve?" "What does she do?" Ethan had been masterfully vague. "She's very pleasant, Jess. And yes, I'm sure Mom will find her perfectly acceptable. She's in wellness." "Wellness," Jessica had echoed, sounding slightly dubious. "Like she sells those green juice cleanses, something like that," Ethan had mumbled, eager to change the subject. The less said, the less that could be misconstrued, or worse, investigated by his sister's formidable intelligence network. The day of the wedding arrived cloaked in the kind of bright, unforgiving Texan sunshine that left no room for shadows. Ethan felt the familiar knot of tension tighten in his stomach. He'd managed multi-billion-dollar mergers with less trepidation. He adjusted his bespoke tuxedo, glanced at the small, exquisitely wrapped gift for Jessica and David, and then at his watch. Time to collect Sophia. He drove his Aston Martin, a concession to the celebratory nature of the day, though he preferred his more understated sedans, towards Sophia's modest apartment complex. He found himself replaying their rehearsal conversations, a faint line appearing between his brows. She was an enigma, this Sophia Rossi, poised and articulate one moment, then making a dry, witty comment that caught him completely off guard the next. He was still confident in his assessment of her as fundamentally simple, yet there were flickers of something more complex beneath the surface. He dismissed it. Today was about getting through the wedding with minimal fuss. He parked, took a deep breath, and walked to her door. He rang the bell, a strange sense of, not quite anticipation, but a definite curiosity thrumming beneath his usual composure. He straightened his tie, schooling his features into a polite, neutral expression. He was ready for the sensible, unremarkable Miss Rossi to emerge, ready to play her part. The door began to open. The door to Sophia Rossi's apartment swung inward, and for a sequence of heartbeats that stretched into an eternity, Ethan Knight forgot how to breathe. He forgot his sister's wedding, the carefully constructed, plausible involvement narrative, even his own name. All cognitive function seemed to cease, replaced by a singular, overwhelming wave of utter astonishment. The woman standing before him was Sophia Rossi. Yes, but a version of her he could never have conceived, not even in his most imaginative non-business-related moments, which were admittedly few and far between. The simple grounded yoga instructor he had catalogued in his mind had vanished. In her place stood a vision of such breathtaking elegance and unexpected glamour that it quite literally stole the air from his lungs. She wore a gown the color of a twilight sky, a deep, luminous cobalt blue that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. The silk whispered around her, an elegant, off-the-shoulder design that hugged the soft, womanly curves of her body with an artistry that was both sophisticated and sensuous. Her chestnut brown hair, which he'd only ever seen, pulled back in a practical bun or simple ponytail, now cascaded in rich, glossy waves over her bare shoulders, framing a face that seemed sculpted by a master. Her makeup was subtle, yet transformative, highlighting large, intelligent dark eyes that now sparkled with an almost mischievous light, framed by long, curled lashes. Her lips, painted a soft, natural peach, were curved in a gentle smile that held a universe of unspoken knowledge. A pair of delicate pearl earrings and a slender silver chain that caught the light at the hollow of her throat were her only adornments. Yet she radiated a captivating charm that outshone any diamond. This was not the understated, perfectly suitable simplicity he had envisioned. This was a spectacular cinematic transformation. This was a problem. A beautiful, captivating, entirely unforeseen problem. His mind, usually a well-oiled machine of logic and strategy, sputtered. Miss Rossi. He managed the name, a clumsy sound in the suddenly thick air. He felt his carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. Sophia. Her smile widened a touch of that gentle amusement he was beginning to recognize, though now it seemed amplified bolder. Ethan, she said, her voice still calm, but laced with a new, vibrant warmth. I hope I haven't. Overdressed for the occasion, overdressed. He wanted to laugh, a hysterical, bewildered sound. She wasn't overdressed. She was a revelation. No. He stammered, his eyes still locked on her, tracing the elegant line of her collarbone, the soft curve of her shoulder. Not at all. You look incredible. The word felt laughably inadequate. It was like calling a supernova. Bright. Thank you, she said, accepting the compliment with a quiet grace that somehow made her even more stunning. I bought this dress a long time ago for a special occasion that never quite materialized. I thought your sister's wedding might finally be its moment. She gave a little Cinderella-esque twirl, the silk rustling like a secret. Shall we? Nodding dumbly. Ethan offered his arm, a gesture that felt both foreign and strangely predestined. The light brush of her fingers against his tuxedo sleeve sent an unexpected jolt through him, a current he was entirely unprepared for. The Ethan Knight, who prided himself on his imperviousness, his control felt flustered. It was an entirely novel and deeply unsettling sensation. His internal monologue was a chaotic jumble. This is Sophia Rossi, the yoga instructor, the one I mentally filed under sensible and unremarkable. Did she secretly moonlight as a Bond girl and conveniently forget to mention it in her resume? How could I have been so blind? The word simple now seemed like the ultimate misjudgment, a testament to his own staggering lack of perception. The drive to the wedding venue, a luxurious resort overlooking Lake Travis, was a masterpiece of unspoken tension and awkward, charged silences. Ethan, usually so articulate, found himself fumbling for conversation. He cleared his throat several times, made a comment about the traffic that sounded inane even to his own ears, and then lapsed back into a state of stunned contemplation. Sophia beside him seemed an oasis of calm, though he caught her glancing at him occasionally, a subtle, knowing smile playing on her lips. Was she enjoying his discomfort? He wouldn't blame her. He had, after all, underestimated her so profoundly. "Are you quite all right, Ethan?" she asked, eventually, her voice a soft melody in the confines of the car. "Fine," he managed, his voice a little hoarse. "Just processing." Processing, she queried, that hint of amusement back. The scope of work has suddenly become more visually demanding. He actually felt a flush creep up his neck. Something like that, he admitted, a reluctant smile tugging at his own lips. "You neglected to mention goddess transformation in your list of skills, Miss Rossi." "It wasn't in the job description, Mr. Knight," she retorted lightly, her eyes sparkling. As they pulled up to the grand entrance of the resort, valets scurrying to open their doors, Ethan took one last fortifying breath. He was about to walk into his sister's wedding, a veritable minefield of familial expectations, with a woman who had just single-handedly demolished all his preconceived notions and left his well-ordered world feeling decidedly tilted. He stepped out of the car and turned to offer Sophia his hand. As she emerged, the last rays of the setting sun, catching the cobalt of her dress, turning it to sapphire, he knew. This evening was going to be anything but the quiet, controlled charade he had meticulously planned. They walked towards the grand ballroom, the murmur of conversations and the distant strains of a string quartet growing louder. And as they stepped across the threshold, Ethan was acutely aware of every head in the room, turning of conversations, faltering of a sudden, palpable hush falling over the assembled guests. It wasn't just because he was Ethan Knight, the bride's often elusive brother. He knew with a sinking, exhilarating feeling that it was because of the breathtakingly beautiful, utterly mysterious woman on his arm. Across the room, he saw his sister Jessica, mid-laugh with a bridesmaid freeze. Her jaw literally dropped. Beside her, his mother, ever the epitome of composure, blinked several times, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her pearls. Their expressions of stunned, open-mouthed disbelief were almost comical. Almost. Ethan felt Sophia's fingers tighten infinitesimally on his arm, a silent acknowledgement of the ripple, no, the tidal wave their entrance had just created. He looked down at her, at the serene smile on her lips, the calm confidence in her eyes, and a single treacherous thought lodged itself in his mind. This is going to be a very, very interesting night. The initial stunned silence that greeted their entrance quickly morphed into a rising tide of murmurs and intrigued glances. Ethan, ever attuned to the social currents of his world, felt the shift acutely. He guided Sophia further into the opulent ballroom, the crystal chandeliers scattering diamonds of light across the polished floor. His mother and Jessica were already making a beeline for them, their expressions a captivating blend of astonishment and avid curiosity. Ethan darling Mrs. Knight was the first to reach them, her eyes, so like Ethan's own, wide with undisguised surprise as they swept over Sophia. "You didn't tell us you were bringing someone so remarkable." Her usual composed elegance seemed momentarily ruffled. "Mum, this is Sophia Rossi," Ethan said, his voice smoother than he felt. "Sophia, my mother, Eleanor Knight, and my sister Jessica." Jessica, usually a whirlwind of words, was momentarily speechless, her gaze fixed on Sophia with an almost reverent awe. "Wow." She finally breathed, a wide, genuine smile spreading across her face. "Just wow. Ethan, she's incredible. Why have you been hiding her from us?" She grabbed Sophia's hand impulsively. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Sophia. I'm Jessica, and this is my husband, David." She gestured to a pleasant-looking man who offered Sophia a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you all," Sophia said, her voice a calm, melodious counterpoint to Jessica's exuberant energy. "And congratulations, Jessica David. Everything looks absolutely beautiful." Her gaze swept the room with genuine appreciation, and Ethan noted with a strange pang of something akin to pride how effortlessly she carried herself. "Oh, thank you." Jessica beamed. "But honestly, right now, you're the most beautiful thing in this room. Isn't she, Mum, Ethan? I always knew you had good taste, hidden somewhere under all those quarterly reports." Ethan managed a tight smile. "Jess, please." Mrs. Knight, having regained her composure, offered Sophia a more measured, though still intrigued, smile. "Welcome, Sophia." "It's a delight. Ethan rarely surprises us like this." Her eyes held a shrewd, appraising quality, but there was a flicker of warmth there, too. The next hour was a blur of introductions. Ethan found himself navigating a gauntlet of relatives, business associates, and family friends, all eager to meet his mysterious companion. He had anticipated this part with a degree of dread, expecting to constantly manage the conversation to steer Sophia away from conversational pitfalls. He needn't have worried. Sophia was nothing short of brilliant. She handled his inquisitive Aunt Carol's probing questions about their courtship with a disarming charm, concocting a hilariously romantic and entirely fictional tale about a chance meeting at an obscure art gallery, exhibit on a rainy afternoon, a story so vivid and charmingly delivered that even Ethan found himself almost believing it. He played along, adding a detail here and there, a shared look of feigned nostalgia, the two of them an unexpectedly adept improvisational duo. When a notoriously stuffy business rival of Ethan's, a Mr. Grantham, tried to engage Sophia in a condescending discussion about the frivolity of the wellness industry, Sophia had met his pronouncements with a serene smile and a few pointed, impeccably researched questions about the stress-related health costs impacting corporate productivity, leaving Mr. Grantham blinking and momentarily speechless. Ethan had to physically suppress a triumphant smirk. He watched, fascinated, as Sophia moved through the glittering crowd, not as a hired companion, but as if she belonged there, as if she were born to navigate these opulent waters. She discussed literature with a university professor, debated the nuances of a recent symphony performance with an elderly countess, and even offered a few surprisingly insightful comments on a new tech merger to one of Ethan's own board members. She wasn't just beautiful. She was intelligent, articulate, and possessed an effortless grace that drew people to her. The boss in him, the man who valued competence and results, was undeniably impressed. The man beneath the armor, however, was experiencing a far more complex array of emotions. He found himself watching her, really watching her. The way her eyes lit up when she spoke about something passionately, the subtle humor that curved her lips, the genuine warmth she extended to even the most tedious of his acquaintances. The simple yoga instructor he had hired was, in reality, a woman of extraordinary depth and charisma, and the realization that he was the one who had been so remarkably unperceptive was a humbling one. Later, as the band leader announced the first waltz for the bride and groom to be followed by the wedding party, Jessica rushed over, her eyes shining. "Ethan, you and Sophia have to dance. Everyone is dying to see you two on the floor." Ethan felt a familiar resistance. Public displays of affection, even feigned ones, were not his forte. He glanced at Sophia. "Are you up for this?" he asked, his voice lower than intended. Sophia met his gaze, a playful challenge in her eyes. "Are you sure you are Mr. Knight?" she murmured, her lips curving into a smile that made his chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with stress. "Or is this another one of those delightful clauses in the contract I might have overlooked?" Before he could formulate a suitably detached reply, the music swelled a classic soaring waltz. Jessica was practically dragging them towards the dance floor. He found himself face to face with Sophia, the scent of her subtle perfume, something light and floral like jasmine, enveloping him. "Well then," he said, a reluctant smile finally breaking through his reserve. "Shall we give them a show? Ms. Rossi?" He offered his hand. "I thought you'd never ask, Ethan," she replied, placing her hand in his. Her touch was warm, her fingers fitting against his, as if they belonged there. He placed his other hand on her waist, feeling the soft silk of her gown, the surprising warmth of her skin beneath. She rested her hand lightly on his shoulder, and then they were moving. At first he was stiff, self-conscious, acutely aware of the dozens of eyes on them. He focused on the steps, on not treading on her and gown. But Sophia moved with an innate, fluid grace, her body following his lead effortlessly, anticipating his movements, almost before he made them. She looked up at him, her dark eyes luminous in the soft light, and the carefully constructed walls around Ethan Knight's heart began to tremble. The noise of the ballroom faded. The watching crowd seemed to recede. There was only the music swelling and dipping, and Sophia in his arms, her nearness, a potent, intoxicating force. He found himself no longer performing. The hand on her waist tightened, drawing her infinitesimally closer. His steps became more confident, more assured, guided not by memory, but by an instinct he hadn't known he possessed. He looked down into her eyes, and for a timeless moment the world stopped. He saw not a hired companion, not a yoga instructor, but simply Sophia, a woman of intelligence, warmth, and a beauty that went far deeper than the exquisite gown she wore. He saw a flicker of surprise in her own eyes, a dawning awareness that mirrored his own. This was no longer an act. This was something real, something powerful, something that left him feeling both profoundly vulnerable and exhilaratingly alive. The waltz ended, the final chord hanging in the air like a sigh. They stood for a moment, still holding each other, the spell unbroken. Her breathing was a little uneven, her lips slightly parted. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a wild, unfamiliar rhythm. He could feel the warmth of her hand in his, the gentle pressure of her fingers on his shoulder. He didn't want to let go. He didn't want this moment, this feeling, this connection to end. He searched her eyes, trying to read the emotions swirling there. Was it possible? Could she be feeling even a fraction of the bewildering, overwhelming emotions that were currently surging through him? Her gaze held his, a silent, questioning intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. The charade, the contract, the carefully constructed pretenses, they had all dissolved in the magic of a single dance. And Ethan Knight knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified him that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The drive back to Sophia's apartment was saturated with an unspoken awareness, a delicate tension that hummed between them, as charged as the air before a summer storm. The easy camaraderie of their earlier performance had deepened into something more complex, more real. The silence in the car wasn't empty. It was filled with the lingering notes of the waltz, the memory of shared glances, the ghost of her hand in his. Ethan cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud. "You were exceptional tonight, Sophia." He said the words an understatement. "My family was thoroughly charmed. Jessica is already planning your inclusion in all future Knight family holidays, I suspect." Sophia turned to him, a soft smile playing on her lips in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. "It was an enjoyable evening. Your family is lovely, and Jessica certainly has an infectious enthusiasm." She paused. "And you, Ethan, did your plausible involvement meet all contractual obligations?" There it was again, that gentle teasing, that ability she had to cut through his formality. He found himself actually smiling a genuine, unrehearsed smile. "Exceeded them, I'd say. especially the part where you outmaneuvered Grantham on fourth-quarter profit margins." I nearly applauded. She laughed, a clear, refreshing sound that seemed to fill the car. He seemed to invite a robust discussion. "And as for the dress," she added, a mischievous twinkle in her eyes, "you seemed rather surprised by it." "I did tell you I had something suitable." "Suitable," Ethan echoed, shaking his head slightly. "Sophia, you were a vision." I confess my definition of suitable has been irrevocably altered. His earlier image of a sensible linen maxi dress now seemed utterly ludicrous. He had been a fool, a blind, arrogant fool. He pulled up outside her apartment building. The streetlights cast long shadows, and for a moment neither of them moved to break the spell. The end of the evening, the end of their agreement, loomed. "Well," Sophia said softly, her voice a little husky. "Thank you, Ethan, for a most unconventional, yet surprisingly delightful evening." The pleasure, he said, his voice equally low, was entirely mine. He wanted to say more, so much more, but the words caught in his throat. He watched her walk to her door, the cobalt blue of her dress, a fleeting shimmer in the darkness, and a profound sense of loss, sharp and unexpected, pierced through him. Sleep that night was a distant country Ethan Knight could not reach. His luxurious penthouse, usually a sanctuary of quiet order, felt vast and empty. He paced the length of his living room, the city lights sprawling beneath him like a carpet of indifferent stars. But his mind was filled with only one image, Sophia. Her smile, the intelligence in her eyes, the unexpected warmth of her hand in his, the way she'd felt in his arms during that damnable transformative waltz. He replayed every moment, every conversation, cringing at his initial dismissive assessment of her. He who prided himself on his astute judgment of character had failed so spectacularly. He had hired her to be a pretty uncomplicated backdrop, and she had instead stolen the entire show, captivating not just his family, but him. The realization was a jolt to his system, a fundamental recalibration of everything he thought he knew about attraction, about connection. His life, so meticulously curated, so focused on profit and loss, suddenly felt hollow, devoid of color, devoid of Sophia. By dawn, a decision had solidified as hard and clear as a diamond. He couldn't let this be the end. This strange, beautiful, entirely unexpected feeling. He had to know if it was real, if it could be real. He found her number, his finger hovering over the call button. What was he doing? This was impulsive, illogical. And yet, he pressed call. She answered on the third ring, her voice slightly sleepy, but still clear and warm. "Hello, Sophia. It's Ethan. Ethan Knight." He cringed internally at his own formality. Old habits. A pause. Then Ethan. "Good morning. Is everything all right? Did I perhaps forget a crucial, plausible involvement debriefing note?" The gentle humor was there, even through the early morning haze. He seized on the word. "Actually, yes. A debriefing. I think it's essential. To discuss the key performance indicators of last night's engagement. Are you free for breakfast?" He could almost hear her smile. "Ah, the KPIs," she said, her voice laced with amusement. "Of course. How could I forget the post-project analysis? Shall I prepare a full report with pie charts on familial approval ratings?" Ethan actually chuckled. "Perhaps just coffee, and your insights would suffice. There's a small cafe near your studio, the Daily Grind. Say an hour it is." "Mr. Knight," she agreed. "I'll bring my most insightful observations." He arrived at the cafe early, an unfamiliar nervousness coiling in his gut. This was absurd. He chaired international board meetings, negotiated with titans of industry, yet the prospect of breakfast with Sophia Rossi had him feeling like an untried schoolboy. She walked in dressed in simple jeans, and a soft cream-colored sweater, her hair pulled back loosely, a few tendrils escaping to frame her face. No gown, no elaborate makeup. And yet his heart gave that same ridiculous lurch it had the night before. Her beauty, he was rapidly discovering, was not reliant on artifice. It radiated from within, from her confidence, her intelligence, her serene, captivating presence. After they'd ordered, an awkward silence descended, broken only by the clatter of crockery and the low hum of conversation from other tables. Ethan took a fortifying sip of his black coffee. Sophia, he began, then stopped searching for the right words. The carefully rehearsed phrases he'd considered during his sleepless night now seemed trite, inadequate. He met her gaze, his own direct and stripped of all pretense. I know our agreement was for one night, and you played your part more brilliantly than I could ever have imagined. I'm incredibly grateful. He paused, the words he truly wanted to say lodged in his chest. But the truth is, Sophia, last night, it wasn't just an act for me. Not after a while. Her dark eyes searched his, a flicker of surprise, then something more guarded, replacing the earlier amusement. I genuinely enjoyed being with you, he continued, his voice earnest, a raw sincerity he rarely allowed himself to show. Talking with you, dancing with you, discovering the incredible woman you are. I misjudged you, Sophia. Terribly. I hired you, expecting someone to simply fill a space, and instead, he took a deep breath. Instead, I met you. Ethan, she began, her voice soft, uncertain. I want to get to know you better. Sophia, he pressed on, a sense of urgency propelling him. For real. No contracts, no pretenses. Not as a hired companion, but as Sophia Rossi, the intelligent, witty, astonishingly beautiful yoga teacher I've been fortunate enough to stumble across. I know this is unorthodox, sudden, and given how we met, you have every right to be skeptical. She was silent for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful as she stirred her tea. He could see a myriad of emotions playing across her face. Surprise, certainly, but also a touch of wariness, and perhaps, just perhaps, a hint of something else, something that mirrored the fragile hope blooming in his own chest. This is, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper, a lot to take in, Ethan. We come from very different worlds. What started as a business transaction? I know, he interjected gently. I know it's a mess, but I'm willing to navigate that mess to make an effort if you are. If you'd give me a chance. Last night, being with you, I felt something genuine. A sense of peace, of rightness that I haven't felt in a very long time. Maybe ever. I don't want to just let that go. Sophia looked up, and her eyes, though still cautious, held a new softness. A faint smile touched her lips. A post-project analysis, you called it. She said, a ghost of her earlier teasing returning. Perhaps one more debriefing session wouldn't be entirely out of order. To discuss future projections, hope sharp and bright surged through Ethan. Dinner Wednesday night, I know a Thai place in East Austin that's supposed to be incredible. She nodded slowly. Wednesday night sounds promising, Ethan. Then, with a twinkle in her eye that made his heart leap, she added, but this time, Mr. Knight, you don't get to hire me. This one's on you. He grinned, a wide, unrestrained grin that felt wonderfully unfamiliar. Miss Rossi, he said, his voice full of a lightness he hadn't realized he'd been missing. It would be my absolute honor. Their first real date at the East Austin Thai restaurant Ethan had suggested was a world away from the glittering charade of Jessica's wedding. There were no ball gowns, no scrutinizing relatives, Just the two of them in a cozy, bustling eatery, the air fragrant with lemongrass and chili. Ethan, to his own surprise, found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. He shed the boss persona like an uncomfortably stiff suit and simply talked. Sophia, in turn, was an engaging conversationalist, her insights sharp, her laughter easy and genuine. They discovered a shared love for old movies, a surprising mutual fondness for a niche documentary filmmaker, and an equal disdain for overly sweet desserts. Ethan learned about Sophia's passion for bringing yoga to underserved communities, her dream of a small wellness center that was more about holistic healing than high-end exclusivity. He listened, truly listened, fascinated by the quiet passion that illuminated her face when she spoke of her aspirations. In the weeks that followed, Ethan made a conscious effort to step into Sophia's world. He found himself on a sun-drenched Saturday morning, navigating the chaotic, vibrant aisles of a local farmer's market, a wicker basket Sophia's insistence on his arm. Ethan Knight, who usually had his organic produce curated and delivered, was now earnestly discussing the merits of heirloom tomatoes with a man whose overalls had seen better decades. Sophia had watched him, a smile of pure amusement dancing in her eyes, especially when he'd looked utterly bewildered by the concept of bartering for beets. He even, at her gentle persuasion, attended one of her beginner yoga classes. The experience was humbling. While Sophia moved with effortless grace, guiding her students with a calm, soothing voice, Ethan found himself a tangle of uncooperative limbs, his attempts at a downward dog looking more like a confused giraffe. The quiet chuckles from the back row and Sophia's valiant attempt to maintain a serene composure while offering him gentle adjustments became a shared, humorous memory. "You have excellent focus, Ethan," she told him later, her eyes sparkling, "even if your tree pose is more of a wind-swept sapling." Jessica, of course, was ecstatic about their burgeoning relationship. Ethan, feeling it was only fair, had eventually confessed the rather unorthodox origins of their connection. To his surprise, after an initial moment of stunned silence, his sister had burst into delighted laughter. "Oh, Ethan, that is the most ridiculously romantic B-movie plot I have ever heard, and it actually worked. Sophia is a gem. Don't you dare mess this up, big brother." Her subsequent dating advice, often delivered with conspiratorial winks, ranged from the well-meaning to the hilariously impractical, usually involving grand romantic gestures he was fairly certain Sophia would find mortifying. But not everyone in Ethan's world shared Jessica's enthusiasm. Whispers began to circulate in his high society sphere, polite veiled inquiries at first, then more overt, curious glances when he brought Sophia to less formal, business-related gatherings. Sophia Rossi, the yoga instructor, an anomaly in a world julieted by heiresses' socialites and fellow corporate power players. Sophia, with her quiet dignity and unpretentious charm, seemed unfazed, but Ethan felt a growing protectiveness, a simmering anger at the subtle and sometimes not-so-subtle condescension directed her way. The storm finally broke at the annual Symphony Gala, one of Austin's premier society events. Ethan had been hesitant to bring Sophia, knowing the kind of scrutiny she would face, but she had insisted her gaze calm and steady. "Ethan," she'd said gently, "if we're going to do this, really do this, we can't hide. I'm not ashamed of who I am or what I do. And you shouldn't be either." She had looked breathtaking, of course, in a simple floor-length emerald green dress that made her dark eyes shine like jewels. But it wasn't her beauty that drew the ire of Mrs. Eleanor Harrington, a doyenne of Austin society, known for her sharp tongue and even sharper opinions. Mrs. Harrington, whose own daughter had once been a hopeful contender for Ethan's attention, cornered them near the champagne fountain, her smile as brittle as spun sugar. "Ethan, darling," she cooed her eyes, flicking over Sophia with a dismissive air. "And this must be your new friend. Miss Rossi, is it?" "Sophia." "Rossi," Ethan corrected his voice, cool his hand instinctively finding Sophia's. "Ah, yes." Mrs. Harrington continued, her voice carrying clearly. "I hear you teach. Yoga, my dear. Such a relaxing little hobby. Good for maintaining one's flexibility, I suppose, though hardly as taxing as, say, managing a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Wouldn't you agree, Ethan?" Her words were a clear, calculated barb designed to demean Sophia and subtly remind Ethan of the disparity in their stations. A hush fell over their immediate vicinity. Ethan felt Sophia stiffen slightly beside him, though her expression remained outwardly serene. He felt a cold fury rise within him, a protective instinct so fierce it surprised even himself. This was not just about defending Sophia, it was about defending their relationship, their right to choose their own happiness, free from the venomous judgments of others. He turned to face Mrs. Harrington fully, his grip tightening on Sophia's hand. His voice, when he spoke, was dangerously quiet, each word laced with an icy precision that could make grown men quail in his boardroom. "Mrs. Harrington," he began, his gaze unwavering, "Sophia is far more than a yoga teacher, though that, in itself, is a profession I hold in high esteem, as it brings peace and wellness to many. Something perhaps a few of us here tonight could benefit from." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. "She is also one of the most intelligent, insightful, and compassionate women I have ever had the privilege of knowing. Her value," he imbued the word with a chilling emphasis, "is not measured by stock portfolios or corporate titles, but by the depth of her character and the kindness of her heart." He looked down at Sophia, his expression softening as his eyes met hers. He saw the surprise, the gratitude, the dawning emotion in their depths, and it fueled his resolve. "What Sophia does," he continued, his voice ringing with conviction, addressing not just Mrs. Harrington, but everyone within earshot, "is bring balance, clarity, and strength to people's lives. And I, for one, find that infinitely more valuable and challenging than simply shuffling assets. She has brought a richness to my life that I hadn't realized was missing." He then turned back to a visibly stunned Mrs. Harrington. "So yes, Mrs. Harrington, I am incredibly proud to have Sophia by my side. And if anyone finds that problematic, then frankly, the problem lies with them, not with us." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by a choked sob from somewhere nearby. He suspected it was Jessica, already dabbing at her eyes. Then slowly, a smattering of applause began, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Mrs. Harrington, her face a mask of affronted dignity, turned on her heel and retreated. Ethan looked at Sophia. Her eyes were shining unshed tears, making them luminous. She didn't speak, but the look she gave him, a look of profound love-trust and a gratitude that went beyond words, was more eloquent than any speech. In that moment, standing in the midst of Austin's glittering elite, Ethan Knight felt a sense of triumph, not over Mrs. Harrington, but over his own past self, the cautious, closed-off man who would never have dared to expose his heart to fight so openly for what truly mattered. He squeezed Sophia's hand. "Are you all right?" he murmured. She nodded, a radiant smile breaking through her tears. "More than all right, Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his soul that this was a turning point. They had faced down the dragons of societal expectation, of prejudice, and their bond had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, tempered in the fire. The path ahead might still have its challenges, but he knew, looking into Sophia's eyes that they would face them together. Their trust, once a fragile seedling, born of an unconventional agreement, had now taken firm, unshakable root. The months that followed the symphony gala unfolded with a quiet beauty, a steady deepening of the bond between Ethan and Sophia. The awkwardness of their initial arrangement had long since dissolved, replaced by an easy intimacy, a comfortable rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Ethan, once a man who measured his life in quarterly earnings and strategic acquisitions, found himself measuring it in shared laughter, quiet evenings spent discussing everything and nothing, and the simple, profound joy of waking up next to Sophia. He discovered in himself a capacity for tenderness he hadn't known existed. He learned the names of her favorite authors, the specific blend of tea she preferred in the mornings, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she truly smiled. He saw her not just as the stunning woman who had taken his breath away, or the intelligent mind that challenged and delighted him, but as his anchor, his confidant, the calm center in his often turbulent world. He was quite simply deeply and irrevocably in love. Sophia, in turn, blossomed under the warmth of Ethan's genuine affection and unwavering support. The initial caution she'd held had given way to a radiant trust. She saw past the formidable boss exterior to the kind, thoughtful, and surprisingly vulnerable man beneath. He championed her dreams for a community-focused wellness center with the same fervor he applied to his business ventures, offering not just financial backing, but insightful advice, and most importantly, an unshakable belief in her vision. With Ethan, she felt seen, cherished, and utterly completely herself. Jessica, their most enthusiastic cheerleader, was overjoyed, frequently reminding Ethan with a playful wink that he owed her a significant finder's fee for her inspired, albeit initially resisted, matchmaking instincts. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled around Austin, Ethan told Sophia he had a surprise for her. He drove them out of the city, a quiet excitement thrumming in his chest, until they reached a gently rolling piece of land on the outskirts overlooking a serene valley bathed in the soft afternoon light. A magnificent ancient oak tree stood sentinel on a small rise. "Ethan, where are we?" Sophia asked, her voice filled with a curious wonder as she stepped out of the car, the breeze tugging at her hair. He took her hand, his heart swelling. "This Sophia," he said, leading her towards the oak tree, "is where I hope we can build our future." Beneath the spreading branches of the oak, a discreet, elegantly designed architectural rendering was displayed on an easel. It depicted a beautiful modern home, filled with light and warmth, seamlessly integrated into the landscape. And there, an integral part of the design was a spacious, light-filled studio with large glass windows overlooking a tranquil meditation garden. It was in every detail the wellness center Sophia had so passionately described to him, her dream given tangible form. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning, overwhelming emotion. "Ethan, I don't understand." He turned to face her, his gaze filled with all the love that consumed him. "I've listened, Sophia," he said softly, "to every dream, every hope you've shared. This house, this studio, it's designed for us, for the life I want to build with you. A life filled with peace and purpose and your incredible light." Then slowly, deliberately, Ethan Knight got down on one knee before her, the man who once commanded empires, now humbled by the power of a love he had never expected to find. He took a small cobalt blue velvet box from his pocket, the exact shade of the gown she had worn on that fateful night at Jessica's wedding, the night that had irrevocably changed both their lives. He opened it, Nestled inside was an engagement ring, simple yet exquisite, featuring a teardrop-shaped sapphire as deep and luminous as her eyes, surrounded by a delicate halo of tiny star-like diamonds. "Sophia Rossi," he began, his voice sincere, trembling slightly with the depth of his emotion. "I once hired you to be my girlfriend for a single night. It was without a doubt the most impulsive, most unconventional, and by far the wisest decision of my entire life." A soft smile touched his lips. "That night I was shocked by how beautiful you were, how intelligent, how utterly amazing. But in all the days and months since getting to know the incredible depth of your heart, your spirit, your unwavering kindness, I've been even more astounded to realize that you are far more wonderful than I could ever have imagined." He looked deeply into her eyes, his own reflecting the vastness of his love. "You brought light and laughter and profound meaning into a life I hadn't even realized was so grey. You taught me what true partnership feels like, what simple, unadulterated happiness is. I don't want just one night of pretending anymore, Sophia. I don't want to ever pretend with you again. I want forever. Every day, every moment with you by my side. As my best friend, my partner, my love, as my wife." His voice cracked slightly. "Sophia Rossi, the love of my life, will you marry me?" Tears were streaming freely down Sophia's face, now tears of pure, unbridled joy. She couldn't speak, could only nod vigorously, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Yes," she finally choked out, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, Ethan, yes, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. Yes." With a joyful laugh, Ethan slid the sapphire ring onto her slender finger. It fit perfectly, a shimmering promise of all their tomorrows. He stood, pulling her into his arms, and kissed her with all the passion, all the tenderness, all the profound gratitude that filled his soul. It was a kiss that sealed their past, celebrated their present, and welcomed their future there, beneath the ancient oak with the golden Austin sun setting over the hills. Later, as they stood wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars begin to prick the darkening sky, Ethan chuckled. You know, he murmured against her hair. The penalty clause for breaking this particular lifetime contract would have been absolutely severe. Sophia laughed, tilting her head back to look at him, her eyes shining with love and amusement. "Oh, I have no doubt, Mr. Knight. But I think this is one agreement neither of us will ever want to terminate." They began planning their wedding. Not a grand societal affair like Jessica's, but a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by their closest family and friends, held right there on the land where their future home would stand. There would be no need for pretense, no need for acting only sincere vows, and a boundless shared happiness. Their love story, which had begun with an unexpected proposition and a rather comical misunderstanding of what suitable attire entailed, had weathered the storms of societal judgment and personal insecurities. It had overcome differences, erased preconceived notions, and blossomed into a romance as beautiful and enduring as the Texas landscape that cradled their dreams. Ethan and Sophia had found their earned peace, a testament to the extraordinary power of an open heart, the courage to change, and the simple, profound truth that sometimes the most unconventional beginnings lead to the most wonderful and lasting love. And so Ethan and Sophia's journey, which began with a most unusual contract, reminds us that the heart often writes the most unexpected and beautiful scripts. How often, perhaps, do we look but don't truly see, allowing preconceived notions or societal whispers to mask the extraordinary worth hidden within another. Their path from pretense to profound truth, whispers that sometimes, in the most unlikely arrangements, the most authentic connections can bloom much like unexpected gardens in a concrete world. This story, with its surprising turns and heartfelt discoveries, has certainly left us with much to reflect on, and perhaps it has resonated with you too. We'd love to hear what moment in Ethan and Sophia's journey from a surprising agreement to a deeply earned commitment touched you the most. And what do you believe was the truest challenge they had to overcome to find their happiness? Your insights mean the world to us as we craft these narratives. If you have any thoughts on today's story, or ideas that could make our future journeys even more captivating, please do share them in the comments below. We truly value your perspective and are always listening, hoping to grow alongside our cherished audience. If Ethan and Sophia's unexpected love story warmed your heart, please show your support with a like and consider sharing it with someone who might find a little hope or a knowing smile in their unique adventure. For more stories that delve into the beautiful complexities of human connection and the surprising ways love can find us, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Let's continue to explore these meaningful paths together and become part of our growing community of story lovers. And while you're here, why not discover another tale of unexpected connections waiting for you right now on your screen? Until next time, may your own life be filled with beautiful surprises and the courage to embrace them. Take care.